looking at the quarterback and running back waiver wire options for you heading into a busy Week 15 because it's the start of the fantasy playoffs. So no more teams on a bye, so a lot of injuries. And at the quarterback position, you're trying to replace Kyler Murray, trying to replace Lamar Jackson, so you could be scrambling. Here are the quarterbacks you could be looking to add for this scoring period. Now again, not necessarily anybody who's a slam dunk must start guy, but Mike White has a ton of potential. Brock Purdy, Ryan Tannehill could be low-end starters in deeper leagues, coming off strong performances for both of them. Taylor Heineke, last time he took on the Giants, was very good. That was 2 weeks ago, 1 game ago for the Commanders because they're coming off a bye. Desmond Ridder, as Dave said, maybe the devil you don't know, making his first start for the Falcons, taking on the Saints. Colt McCoy, now the starter for the Cardinals, presumably with the injury to Kyler Murray. And Baker Mayfield expected to start the rest of the season for the Rams. We saw what he did last Thursday night against the Raiders. Let's talk about a few of these situations here. We've already kind of gotten into a couple of these talking points. We haven't really talked a lot about Brock Purdy. So I know, Dave, you're a little bit skeptical because of the pass attempts. I think, Heath, you are as well, and the loss of Deebo Samuel. But it's hard to overlook what he's done. 18 points stepping in for Garoppolo 2 games ago. 25 fantasy points stepping in as the full-time starter against the Bucs, which is a much tougher defense than he's going to face Thursday night. Can he have at least 18 points again? Do you share that optimism?
He can. It's going to take some pretty wild efficiency, I think, because I don't think the volume will be there.
That's what the 49ers do.
That's what they've done. And I will say, I don't think you should expect, like 6 of his points last week came on a touchdown when he had 2 carries for 3 yards. I don't think you should expect anything at all in the running game from him at all. He's not done that. And so if it's 37 pass attempts like it was against the Dolphins, then I think he has a great chance to get you into that starter range. If it's 21 like it was last week against Tampa Bay, then I think he's going to be closer to 15 fantasy points.
I can accept an 18-point expectation for him. I can count on that. I like the way that he handles and maneuvers himself in the pocket.
Yep.
Doesn't get sacked too often. Kind of reminds me of Favre in that regard. And I think that's what the rushing touchdown was all about last week. He felt pressure, got out of there, saw he had space to get to the end zone, and he went and he scored. I don't think we can count on that. Heath's right. But I think if you expect 18 fantasy points from him, he'll be okay. He's better as your second quarterback in a superflex or a 2 QB league than as your starter in a 1 QB league.
I know, Dave, you're very excited about, you're moderately excited about Ryan Tannehill this week, taking on, hopefully with Treylon Burks, a matchup that's been very tough to figure out because the Chargers secondary's beat up. They have Derwin James potentially out again.
Yeah.
And they haven't given up a lot of production to quarterbacks because everybody runs on them. And that's what the Titans are probably going to do, is run on them. But Tannehill's been sort of living in this 21 to 23-point range 3 of his last 5 games. Can he have another one of those games?
And I think because his expectation is right around 20 fantasy points, that gives him just a little bit of an edge ahead of Brock Purdy. And so I'll take my chances with Tannehill. That Chargers defense, at least 20 fantasy points to 3 of the past 4 quarterbacks they faced. Some of those quarterbacks have been really good. And they did it. I don't know if it was them that did anything to shut Tua Tagovailoa down. I think Tua hurt himself last night.
Brandon Staley had a great game plan. Drop the guys back in coverage and just make sure nothing underneath.
Tua couldn't hit anything.
Because he had no throwing lanes. That was part of it.
Could be that.
I don't want to give Brandon Staley a lot of credit this year.
I know. But if he does something like that, then Derrick Henry's going to average like 7 yards a carry.
Exactly. That's the fear.
Well, I don't think he'll do that against the Titans. I think Tannehill won't necessarily throw as much as he did last week. 38 attempts against Jacksonville. Nobody saw that coming. But I think he can still get you close to 200 yards passing, multiple touchdowns, a couple yards rushing on top.
I'm always skeptical of Ryan Tannehill because of the same reason. I mean, it's just like, how many passes is he going to throw? We've seen him anywhere from 18 to 38 over the last 6 weeks. We've also seen that he has like a 5-point floor when he doesn't get into the end zone. He has 2 passing touchdowns in 3 of his last 5 games. The other, he has 1 passing touchdown in those 2 games combined. This matchup sets up to just do what the Titans really want to do, is run, and run some more.
Is it really that different from what the 49ers have this week, though? Because they're going to be able to run on Seattle.
I've got Tannehill 1 spot ahead of Purdy.
Me too. I have Purdy 1 spot ahead of Tannehill just because I think there's a little bit more opportunity for them to get, and the weapons are certainly better, But
the scheme's better too.
McCaffrey's not going to just run. He's going to get involved in the passing game, and so that's why I think Purdy gets those additional opportunities to get some touchdowns. I'm sorry, what did you say?
The scheme's a lot different too. Like we've seen Kyle Shanahan get 8 yards per attempt out of all kinds of guys, Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard, and so like I have more faith in his passing schemes than I do in what the Titans are trying to do.
All right, see how Tannehill does, and hopefully Treylon Burks, again, dealing with the concussion, is able to play. Taylor Heineke, again, last time he played the Giants, one of his best games, first time over 20 fantasy points since Week 8. So Heath, obviously you're not buying it. You think it's going to be a big run game again for for the Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but you look at that game, what happened was the Giants stayed competitive. It went to overtime. I think they played the entire overtime. So the 41 pass attempts, I think it's going to be closer to the 4 weeks before that where he did not get 230 attempts. I think Washington runs all over the Giants and wins this game.
They did run all over the Giants in that game too,
Yeah.
though. I mean, Robinson had over 100 total yards. Gibson was, around 50 yards. I could see a situation where the Giants are competitive. I mean, this is basically their Super Bowl. They lose this game, they're probably going to miss the playoffs.
Right. They ran 75 offensive plays in that game. They run about 60 for the season. So like maybe he gets to 30 pass attempts.
Yeah, I think he's got a lower floor than Brock Purdy and Ryan Tannehill. So this is a quarterback that is easy for me to stay away from, knowing that it's rare for him to have multiple touchdowns in a game to begin with.
So would you go with McCoy? Would you go with Ritter? Would you go with Baker? Any of those guys over Heineke?
No, I'd take Heineke over those guys. But when it comes to, if I had to rank them, it's Tannehill, Purdy, Heineke. And then I still might put Daniel Jones ahead of Heineke.
And I would start.
Oh, Daniel Jones is available. He'd be Mike White and Daniel Jones. Those would be the two guys to be looking at.
And I would start Heineke over Ritter and Baker as well. Like we only show 24 quarterbacks in the rankings. I think he's 25. So yeah, I'm not quite as far behind as it looks like there.
All right, so we'll see what happens for Heineke. But again, one of his best games, first time over 20 fantasy points since week 8 for him. The quarterbacks to drop, all injury related. Kyler Murray, we do not expect to play again the rest of the season. Russell Wilson, the concussion protocol. He hasn't exactly been producing. It was good to see him do what he did against the Chiefs, but probably not going to be out there in week 15. And Marcus Mariota, again, being placed on IR. There are a lot of other quarterbacks in fewer, rostered in fewer leagues, but in 2 quarterback leagues, if you're scrambling, there are a lot of other options to pivot to. Let's talk about the running backs here. Again, a little bit longer list. Jerick McKinnon leads the list for me, followed by Pierre Strong. Kevin Harris is just kind of in line with the Patriots running back situation. He's not really third. Zamir White, because we don't know as of now what's happening with Josh Jacobs with the finger injury. We expect him to play, but clearly you want to cover yourself there. Chuba Hubbard's been doing a great job for the Panthers of late. You got the Texans situation with Dameon Pierce banged up. Jordan Mason as the number 2 guy there for the 49ers. Marlon Mack now the number 2 guy for the Broncos, and Travis Homer could be the number 1 guy for Seattle, but that doesn't matter. Don't make him a priority based on what we saw despite playing 91% of the snaps. Let's talk about Jerick McKinnon. Heath, you've had a good description about him for the majority of the season, that he's kind of been the safety valve for the Chiefs. And that could be the case if something were to happen to Isaiah Pacheco. But can you trust him in Week 15 as maybe a flex play against the Texans?
I think he's a good PPR flex. That's an excellent way to describe him. I worry a little bit because the games they've won in blowouts this season, he's had almost no usage. He has no more than 7 touches in any game that they've won by double digits. But last week, they did have a big lead against the Broncos. They built that big lead with Jerick McKinnon. If they think that's the best way to attack the Texans, then I think that'd be great for him. I wouldn't expect more than 5 carries in the game, though, even if it's a game where they run, and run some more.
You look at the matchups moving forward for him. It's Houston this week, then it's Seattle, then it's Denver. It's a little tough against Denver. And
He
then
just
Las
had
Vegas
32
in the last
PPR
week.
points against Denver.
It was a little fluky how he got it. He definitely
He
didn't do
get
it
an
running the
underhand
football.
pass.
I mean, let's just go for those softball tosses where there's nobody in front of him. If that keeps happening, that's great. And listen, I know I'm saying it's fluky, but he's in a position where he can make plays like this. And the second touchdown wasn't as fluky as the first touchdown. I love the fact that he's dominating snaps on third downs, passing downs. And when push comes to shove, and Heath talked about this, McKinnon's the guy that they trust the most, more so than Pacheco, in that offense, especially when they're playing from behind. If I needed a running back for this week, he's number 1 on the list.
The one thing I would also say in his favor is we had Clyde Edwards-Helaire month, where it was just for some reason he's going to score all the touchdowns. Then we had Mecole Hardman month, where he was doing all those quirky things and scoring all the quirky touchdowns. It's only been 2 weeks for McKinnon, so he might have 2 more weeks.
He does
as
have,
the guy
though,
scoring the touchdowns.
if you're just looking for a floor, 10 PPR points or more in 3 of his last 5. So he hasn't exactly crushed you over that 5-game span. There's been a couple games that are duds, but can give you that floor. Another guy, though, Dave, it's funny that you mentioned McKinnon. I wouldn't be surprised if Hubbard is better than McKinnon for this week based on how they're running the ball and how he's been used. 14 carries or more in the last 2 games for him. One of them, there was a bye in between. But he's basically become the 1A. Remember when we first got the McCaffrey trade, we thought, okay, how's it going to work out? And Hubbard had the ankle sprain in the first game that McCaffrey was traded. But Hubbard's been doing a great job. Again, this rushing offense has been fantastic. Would you trust Hubbard or McKinnon for this week based on their respective matchups? Because both aren't exactly horrible. The Steelers' run defense has been kind of putrid lately.
It's been terrible. The Ravens really gashed them last week. They've got great blocking. That Panthers offensive line has done a good job blocking. And Pittsburgh just lost one of their defensive linemen, Chris Wormley, for the season. So there's an opportunity for both Panthers running backs to get going. Here's a problem. There's actually 3 because you've got Deontay Foreman as the main back. Hubbard's working behind him and he's dominating the passing downs. And then Raheem Blackshear played 20% of the snaps
first
last
time, though,
week.
that happened.
It is, and it was in a situation where they were able to just absolutely crush a team running the football. Same thing could happen this week, and we know that Deontay Foreman, with his injury, he might not be playing at 100%. There is some intrigue there for Chuba Hubbard, but I'm looking at him as more of a bench stash than a guy that I would trust this week. I'd rather have McKinnon.
I'd rather have Hubbard in non-PPR, and I'd rather have him in half PPR too, but in full PPR, it's McKinnon.
And just for whatever the case may be, we hope Josh Jacobs is playing. But Zamir White, if in fact he does get the opportunity to start, Keith, how would you feel about that?
I think he would be right in this RB30 range just because I wouldn't expect him to do much in the passing game. He could still see 20 carries, though, but this is a game against a Patriots defense that, for the most part, has been fantastic against running backs. Now, they weren't last night against James Conner.
Last 2 games, though,
right.
because Buffalo killed them 2 games ago. It was both
Right.
Devin Singletary and James Conner.
But in both of those games, there were, 7 or 8 catches for the running backs? I don't think those 7 or 8 catches would go to Zamir White.
No, I don't even know
Potentially
if he'd
not.
have 2 targets.
And there is the chance that Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow could return this week, so that could be bad for Josh Jacobs too, because we've seen his receiving numbers pop. But again, insurance policy, Zamir White should be added because we've seen the numbers that Josh Jacobs has put up. All right, the running backs that you're moving on from, a couple Jets on this list because it's clearly Zonovan Knight is the guy, so right around 50% for James Robinson. I don't know why he's still rostered at this point. Michael Carter is the handcuff at best if you want to hold on to him. And then Kenyon Drake falling from 2nd to 3rd on the depth chart. You can move on from Kenyon Drake as well. The wide receivers that could be helping you because, remember, it's a position that's a little bit beat up with some injuries, and maybe these guys can deliver for you. Zay Jones has just been absolutely fantastic for the majority of the last month. DJ Chark's coming off 2 strong games. Chris Moore might be the best receiver for the Texans, just had a big game in Week 14. We hope to get Treylon Burks and Mecole Hardman back. Elijah Moore is in a great spot if Corey Davis is out. Marquise Goodwin gets a revenge game on Thursday night. He's playing well because the Seahawks can't run the ball. Juwan Jennings could benefit without Deebo Samuel on the field. You got Ben Skwarnik coming off a big game with Baker Mayfield. Isaiah Hodgins in a good spot with Richie James a little bit banged up. He scored in back-to-back games. A lot of Patriots because the injuries to Jacoby Myers and Devontae Parker. Maybe Trent Irwin can help you in deeper leagues with the injuries to T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So let's talk about a few of these situations here. And we'll start with the scenario in Jacksonville with Zay Jones. So, is he going to be a superstar once again? Look at these numbers against the Titans. He had the disappointing game in Week 13 against the Lions. But prior to that, though, he's been 40-plus targets in the last month.
At least 10 targets in 3 of his past 4 games, at least 14 PPR points in those games. He would have had at least 10 PPR points against Detroit if he could just hold on to the football. He had a target right in front of the end zone. He dropped it. It would have ended up being a good game for him. I think the Jaguars have no choice but to continue to lean on him in the passing game. I think they're having a hard time running the football. Travis Etienne's numbers certainly reflect that. A game against Dallas, they figure to be in a competitive game, if not chasing points. I think there's definitely an opportunity for Zay Jones to be a top 30 receiver.
Zay Jones or DJ Chark, the former Jaguar, who's coming off 2 strong games but has to now go away from Detroit and has to play a tough Jet secondary.
Yeah, I think it's because of that matchup and because of the fact that for DJ Chark, it's been 2 games, and it's been 2 games with 13 targets, just some excellent big plays down the field, but we know those aren't quite as reliable. For Zay Jones, since Week 10, he is wide receiver 15 in fantasy football. Christian Kirk's wide receiver 16. So these 2 guys have both been high-end number 2 wide receivers for the last month.
And Chark, Dave, I know was your favorite guy on our podcast. Has things changed for you?
Things change. You made a great argument on the podcast. You mentioned how the Jets have just been unbelievable at stopping wide receivers on the deep ball. That's where DJ Chark has made his money over the last couple of weeks, really over the course of his career. I do like him rest of season, though. So if you are looking at a wide receiver, you don't need him this week. Maybe you got a bye and you're looking for a wide receiver and you don't get Zay Jones, Chark would be the one.
In terms of Chris Moore, I know you were a little skeptical of it, but if there is no Nico Collins, no Brandon Cooks, as Adam Azer said on Monday's Fantasy Football Today right here, that he would consider him a borderline top 24 guy because he had a huge game last week against the Cowboys, and now he's taking on a Chiefs team that has been very bad at stopping receivers.
They have been very bad. I'm just worried that the Texans used up all their magic last week. I don't know how they looked that competitive against the Dallas Cowboys, but that's not the Texans offense we've seen for most of the year, and that's not the Chris Moore that we've seen for 7 years in the NFL. I'm always more skeptical of a guy at age 29 who has his 2nd career 100-yard game and his 1st game with double-digit targets to repeat that in the following week, even with a fantastic matchup.
All right, so it could be more of a desperation play, but if you are stuck in some of these deeper leagues, he is coming off, as you saw, the most amazing game of his career and could have a big opportunity without Cooks and Collins for the Houston Texans. Dave, in terms of 2 injured guys that could be returning, Treylon Burks and Mecole Hardman. Burks was playing fantastic until the concussion against the Eagles 2 games ago and could see a lot of targets if Ryan Tannehill throws 38 times again. Mecole Hardman, before he went down, was just on this amazing touchdown streak, and we know he's attached to Patrick Mahomes, which is always a good thing. Which of the two guys interest you more?
Burks interests me more, but I know that he's only available in about a third of CBS Sports leagues, whereas Hardman's available in 2/3 of leagues, and I believe you can still stash him on IR. And as long as that's the case and you've got that IR spot, it's real easy to make a play for Mecole Hardman. Put him in that IR spot when he comes off of it. You potentially use him as a number 3 receiver or a flex play in PPR because he's getting those touchdowns. Maybe even non-PPR, he works as a flex because of the touchdown production that he got before he got hurt.
He did have the abdomen injury in the reports where he was going to be back in week 15. The wide receivers that you're moving on from, again, some injury-related situations. Deebo Samuel, if he's not going to play by week 17, you get your championship game picking back up, but 10-team leagues might be able to move on from him. Tyler Boyd, 1 to 2 weeks absence. He hasn't been producing at a very high level really for the last month plus. Cortland Sutton, we don't know how long he's going to be out, but presumably not going to be the same type of receiver because of Jerry Jeudy and the quarterback situation with Russell Wilson, the concussion protocol. Cooper Kupp, it's time to move on. And Brandon Cooks, probably the same thing. Any of these guys you disagree with that you would hold on to?
No.
Deeper leagues, if I've got Deebo Samuel on my bench, I think I'm going to keep him.
Oh, deeper leagues for sure. You're not dropping these guys in 14-team leagues.
Well, you can drop Kupp and Cooks if it's not keeper leagues, because I don't think they're coming back.
Fair enough.
Sutton might be back eventually, but I don't know if you're going to feel good starting the way that Jerry Judy's been playing.
Tight ends that we're looking at now to add, Evan Ingram is the prize based on how he's performed, but let's not overlook Chigo Okonkwo and what he could do potentially if there is no Traylon Burks once again. Keith told you Tyler Conklin's got top 12 upside, Hunter Henry had 3 for 70 on Monday night, gets another great matchup against the Raiders. And Taysom Hill, no Mark Ingram, potentially no Jawan Johnson. We saw some good performances from him of late. So Heath, Evan Ingram, must-start guy, and I asked this question yesterday. Would you start him or Mark Andrews?
I'm going to start Mark Andrews, but this was one of those situations where I had to move Mark Andrews ahead of Evan Ingram in the rankings, even though in the projections it comes out with Evan Ingram was the better option, because it wasn't just last week. He had 7 targets in their most recent game, 8 points without the touchdown, 14 PPR fantasy points. It's been a long time since Mark Ingram's given you 14 PPR fantasy points.
And could be down to their third-string quarterback there if there is no Lamar Jackson as expected, and potentially no Tyler Huntley with a concussion. Dave Okonkwo was a guy that we were touting on this show last week. He came through, scored a touchdown, and again, Traylon Burks may or may not play. So if there is Burks, there is no Burks, how are you approaching Okonkwo this week?
I would start him if there is no Traylon Burks. I think that he's proven to be an important part of this Titans passing game. The question is will he still be if Traylon Burks comes back? Certainly, he doesn't get a ton of targets to begin with. I'm worried about just how many targets he'll get if Traylon Burks plays, so I'd be nervous to start him if Traylon Burks clears protocol and starts for Tennessee.
Taysom Hill, good game, bad game? How do you feel about Taysom this week?
I think it's just a massive difference in non-PPR versus full PPR. This year, he scored 9.1 PPR fantasy points per game. That makes him tight end 11. He scored 8.3 non-PPR. That makes him tight end 2. He scored more points this year than Mark Andrews in non-PPR.
That's unbelievable.
I do
That's
think
one game.
It's not just one game, but a lot of it's one game. I think he's a mid-range tight end in non-PPR and outside my top 12 in full PPR.
All right, so we'll see what happens. Again, Jawan Johnson being out last week helped him get some more routes, and he did score a touchdown, but we'll see if that happens in the matchup against Atlanta. Tight ends that you're dropping, Tyler Higbee, I don't know why you're holding him at this point, Foster Moreau, because Darren Waller should play in Week 15, and Mike Gesicki, last time he caught a pass, it feels like there was I don't know, just a lot different world that we lived in, because it just feels like it's been forever ago, so not really any reason to trust Mike Gesicki.